Have you ever wondered why some photos just draw you in and make you feel like you're a part of the action? As an example, let's look at these two photos that I took. Why is it that the one creates a feeling of adrenaline where the other one doesn't really create the same effect? The reason why there's two different emotions that are created is because of what I like to call the proximity effect. In this video, I'm going to break down the proximity effect into three different phases. The first being, what is the proximity effect? The second, what are some key things that you need to be aware of when creating this effect? And the third, how you can apply this to your photos so that you can create better images. My name is Wagler. I'm an action sports photographer and educator who's passionate about helping brands and individuals level up their media through photography. So phase one, what is the proximity effect? Proximity is the distance between you and your subject. I know this sounds like a simple concept, but to be completely honest, I didn't realize the effect that proximity had in my photos for the longest time. I remember at the start of my photography career where I would look at photos from my favorite photographers and just feel so drawn, so attracted to their photos, and I didn't really know why. And I'd try and go out and copy the same style that they created, but I was always left frustrated because I couldn't figure out how to create this effect. I remember starting to finally catch on to this, even though I didn't really know the cause behind it, but when I would show photos of really close up to my subject, I would get a lot more likes, a lot more comments, a lot more shares of my photos. And so obviously I would just keep creating that style over and over again because it worked. But when I really started to hone in on my craft of visual storytelling, I realized that there's a lot more to this than just some cool angle. I realized that the proximity effect could actually create an emotion in a viewer if done right. You'll notice that in a lot of my action shots that feel the most powerful, they were actually shot from a lower angle. And the reason why is because it creates a sense of dominance and power. And then when I really got onto this, I started pairing proximity with angles, and that's where the magic really came in. Because it really started to create a stronger emotion in a viewer and make them feel like they were drawn into that photo, like they were a part of it. That's where that sense of really powerful adrenaline is delivered in a photo. But all that being said, not every single photo needs to be up close and personal. A big problem with photographers is I see them asking the question, do I think that this photo looks cool? Rather than asking, how is the viewer going to feel when they see this photo? This is a really big question to be asking, especially when you're shooting sports and there's all this action going on around you. But I think that if you're asking this question in the moment, you've already lost. It's really good to consider the questions before you go into any shoot. What types of images would I like to get from this photo shoot? Why do I want them? What do I want my viewer to feel when they see these photos? This is why really knowing the psychology behind your angles, lighting, composition, and storytelling is really important. And it's important because as photographers, we have a really challenging job to try and tell a story in a few frames, or maybe we only have one frame to get that headliner shot that has to hit its mark. So it's crucial to know when to use the proximity effect to your advantage. I'm not going to leave you hanging though. We're going to touch on when to use this effect in the next two phases. So going into phase number two, we're going to talk about key things to consider to determine whether or not you should use the proximity effect. Quick note though, I use these things more as a general guide, and I realize that everybody's photo shoots are going to be different. So think of these key factors as more like prompts. So the first thing to consider is your environment. Now, when I say environment, I'm not so much talking about the trees, grass, or dirt that's around you. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm more so talking about the atmosphere and the pace. Now, each shooting environment is going to be completely different. But let's say, for example, you're shooting an indoor sport like indoor motocross. Do you think it'd be a good idea to get up close and personal with your subject? No. My rule of thumb when examining environment is it going to wreck the sport, and is it going to be too risky? I mean, realistically, it is pretty self-explanatory, but if you don't know the sport that you're shooting, then get to be a little bit more familiar with it, know how it works, know the boundaries, because when you start to know the fundamentals, you can know more of what's appropriate for that sport. Now, going back to the physical aspect of an environment is really crucial to be thinking about, because that can determine whether or not you have a safe exit from your environment if something were to go wrong, and it also allows you to protect your gear from the elements. I'll give you an example of each scenario. So the first, really knowing the environment that I'm in is super important for exiting an environment. Like for example, when I'm photographing snowmobiles, I have to make sure that my communication is dialed in with that athlete, because I don't really have the ability to move because I'm like knee deep, sometimes waist deep up in snow, and I don't have the ability to get out of the way really quick and move. So I have to be really clear beforehand, okay, this is where you're going to be cutting into my zone, this is where I'm going to be taking the photos, and this is where you're going to be exiting my zone. And if I feel at all like there is some miscommunication or something that's just not really locking in, I'm always like, okay, so this is exactly like what's going on, right? Just want to make sure. Trust me, it is so much better to double and triple check than to have any miscommunication. So if you're in an environment where you can't move fast if something were to go wrong, or something in the environment is blocking you, then that is something that you have to take into consideration. And if you have a gut reaction where you're just not feeling confident or comfortable, then change up the environment, change up the location, just change up the technique altogether, because you don't want to put yourself or the athlete at risk. But like I said before, that's a judgment call that you have to make in the moment. And the second example of why it's important to know the environment that you're in is so you can protect your gear. Like if your subject is going to be going through water, sand, mud, snow, all of those elements could ruin your camera really fast. And this is honestly just kind of inevitable when you're outside up close with your subject. You're going to interact with the elements. That's why when you know the environment, you can be prepared ahead with the right cover. Cameras are really expensive, so be prepared, know the environment that you're in. So moving on to the second aspect of what to consider to determine whether or not you use the proximity effect is the story that you want to tell. I touched on this before, so I don't really need to go into too much depth, but what emotion are you trying to create and what story you're trying to tell with your image? Being up close with your athlete is going to show aggression, power, control, and skill. My personal style is I really love to get up close with my subjects to create those emotions, because I feel like when you're using a telephoto lens and you're far away, it doesn't create that same effect. It doesn't create that same sense of adrenaline. And that's not bad by any means, because you can really let a scene breathe when you're further away. Really just a different style, and I really like to use both of them in my photo shoots where I'm out wide and I'll come in close with my subject. And the reason why I like to do that is because it creates such a really cool pairing that you can give off to your clients, where maybe they can show a wide, show a close, and if they're doing that same trick, then it really creates such a different cool dynamic, because you can do like overlays, and even in like carousel posts, I love to pair these two images. So each of these styles really do have their own place. All right, so getting into phase 3, let's talk about how we can practically implement the proximity effect. Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just want to let you guys know about something that I've personally been working on for those that are looking to level up their action sports photography. It's called the Epic Shot Society. It's a group that I've created for passionate action sports photographers, giving them exclusive behind the scenes content, a file of raw images from those photo shoots, an editing tutorial on those photos, and then to top it off, I have group coaching sessions. If that sounds like something you want to be a part of, I have links to more information below where you can also join the waitlist. I'm only opening 200 spots, so be sure to join the waitlist so that you don't miss out when we open registration. All right, back to the video. Okay, so how I'm generally shooting moments like these is with my 24 to 70mm lens, and I'm usually sitting somewhere between the 24mm to 35mm. That's gonna give me a nice wide view. On this shoot specifically though, somebody loaned me their 9mm, which was actually really sick. I've never used a wide angle lens that wide before, and it created such a sweet effect, and I'm like, man, I gotta get me one of these. So I'll generally communicate with my athlete, okay, I want you roughly between like 2 to 4 feet away from me, and then I'm just gonna kind of fluctuate in and out depending on what kind of look that I want and how wide I want it to look. But before I start shooting anything, I will always ask my athlete, are you okay if I'm standing right here? And I will go stand in that exact spot that I will be in so that they know exactly where I'm going to be. And like I said before, there's no miscommunication. Now the next aspect, do we want sharp photos or do we want photos with motion blur? The process isn't really an exact science. I just kind of go with how I'm feeling in the moment. I'll generally just go back to asking the question, what emotion do I want my viewer to feel with this photo? So if I want them to feel a sense of speed, for example, I'm going to shoot with motion blur. Also ask the question internally or sometimes audibly, what are the chances that I'm going to get a second chance at the shot? If my chances are slim at getting a second shot, I'll usually shoot with a higher shutter speed and just get a really tack sharp photo, because I'll know that I'll walk away with a photo that I'm really happy with, rather than experimenting and being frustrated walking away with a photo that maybe didn't work out. Most times though, I will get a second shot because I'm working in more controlled environments and I'm working with really good athletes that can perform over and over. So I usually kind of change it up from time to time, but most times if I have any doubt, I'm just shooting a sharp photo. I'll give the go ahead, take the shot, review, and make any changes that's gonna make a more impactful shot. And that's my process for creating the proximity effect. If you like this video and you want to continue to level up your action shots, I have a free action sports photography guide down below. So go pick that up. I think that you'll love it. All right, catch you in the next one. Peace.